Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Are You Afraid of the Dark episode review. This episode comes from Season 5. It was written by David Preston and directed by David Winning. And the episode in question is The Tale of C7. Now, The Tale of C7, I never see talked about in the Are You Afraid of the Dark community. It seems to be one of the most invisible stories of the entire franchise, next to some more obscure ones or the books. But specifically from seasons like 1 through 5, this one is up there and forgettable, or at least not talked about. And to be fair, I've seen this episode a collective 3 times, and up until this third time watching, after a while, this one always leaves my memory. So I had to watch it a third time just to make a review on it, just because I need to refresh myself on it. Now, over in the Discord chat, where a bunch of good fellows are in there, we constantly talk about kids' horror. Are You Afraid of the Dark seems to be one that's really popular right now on the chat. And some people were saying that this episode is underrated. So I took that into account and I went and saw some reviews out there for this episode. And it seems to be all on the same wavelength or on the same page. So I don't think this quite qualifies as an underrated episode, but it's definitely overlooked in this show. With that being said, because it's overlooked, there's obvious quality here. If you want to know my thoughts up front, if I had to make it brief very quickly before we go any further, this is a good episode. It's more of a basic good, and in my opinion, this has become my new measuring stick of this franchise. And what I mean by that is, it's kind of so basic good that if I like something more, it's going to get a higher score than it. And if I like something less, it's going to get a score less than it. Or if I do find something by chance that's kind of equal to it, of course, it'll get the same score. But all in all, if you haven't checked out The Tale of C7, honestly, there's nothing in this episode you haven't seen done in other episodes in Dark, if not better. This is one of those emotional ghost stories. It does kind of borrow elements from 2 other episodes that came before it. This was a season 5 episode. It's definitely taking from earlier ones like Whispering Walls and Water Demons and trying to do something like a mashup of that, along with an emotional ghost story that's a dime a dozen in this show. If you're into those or that subgenre of episodes in Are You Afraid of the Dark, I think you would really enjoy this one. I'm going to say up front, this has some of the better technical abilities from directors I've seen in this show. And David Winning, if you don't know his repertoire, he directed episodes like The Tale of the Long Ago Locket. And in Goosebumps, he directed It Came From Beneath the Sink. So this might be my favorite episode I've ever seen him direct next to Sinks. So there's that for you. With that out the way, let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So in Are You Afraid of the Dark, if you're not familiar with the show, it always starts off with the Midnight Society as they gather along this camp trail and they settle around a campfire, and whoever's turn it is to share a story will share their story, and then it will close out with them after the segment is done. So as per usual, the story starts and we follow the narrative of the main character named Jason. And Jason has a younger sister named Lisa and a single mother. And they have recently moved to a lake house out in the middle of nowhere. And Jason and Lisa seem to be kind of mixed on the idea of moving out here. But the mom seems to be really sold on the concept of having a family-run business, being able to sustain her family by herself without the dad in the picture, and to provide a life that could be cozy and comfortable, and they'll have something to come to when they're adults and they can take it over and do whatever they please. And I love the idea of that. I love that the episode kind of starts you off in that touching way, gets you involved in the characters, I should say. Well, almost immediately, Jason and Lisa and their mother are kind of prodding around the house. And the house is like this beautiful, large, like bed and breakfast type of location. And they have this long deck that jets out into the lake in the backyard that looks really awesome. So they're kind of just rummaging around, seeing what they can find because they're kind of low on money. And they find this jukebox. And the jukebox is like from I think the 30s or 40s. It's a very old one of the earliest jukeboxes ever. It's one of those old school ones that you would have to you push the buttons, and then the hand held a record, and they have to turn it over and put it on a record player. Pretty old style, but it surprisingly worked when they plugged it in. But unknowing to them, there's something out there by the lake. And we see this shot of this being, like, in a Sam Raimi Evil Dead type of way. I don't know how they thought of this, but this was really creepy for them to do this. Of this thing just like zooming in down the dock with this creepy music, and then it gets closer and closer to that house window as they keep playing around with it. Well, there's also some other phenomenon going on in the story. Well, there's some noises, let's just say, like some siren calls or some music being sung that seems to wake everybody up. And this has unnerved Jason to the point where he thinks something is wrong or just really off with the situation. And his sister seems to be affected by it too. Well, once he's starting to tinker around with his jukebox, he swears that he sees a vision of this girl in the window. And he freaks out and he goes outside. He startles his mom and his sister, asking if they saw this girl, and they're like, we didn't see anything. And he's like, okay, that was strange. And then later on, he's fixing the jukebox. And as he's fixing the jukebox, he finally gets this close call interaction with this ghost of sorts. And this ghost is of this fair complexion, kind of attractive young blonde woman. And the blonde woman looks very sad. This, of course, petrifies Jason. And after that point, the story jets off into kind of nothing. So Jason takes this sighting as maybe a sign, because throughout the story at this point, he's kind of pushing around different buttons. If you don't know the title, The Tale of C7. C7 represents a letter and a number combination that's on the jukebox. And it seems to be the correlation when he pushes C and 7 that the record seems to not want to work. So for the remainder of the episode, it's pretty much Jason trying to fix this, and he's talking with his sister about this phenomenon, about the songs, about what he saw, and he's swearing up and down that it's really true, and that it seems like she wants something to do with this jukebox. Well, it takes a while to get to the climax, but once it gets there, Jason's sister up and disappears once this song starts playing, and we get the Sam Raimi Evil Dead homage cut shots of the pier running, essentially. And something weird happens. Once Jason's finally able to fix the record, right? He's kind of transported back into this pseudo ghost realm where all these dead people are hanging around inside of the house, and he sees the ghost that he managed to, I guess, help in the situation, and she's finally reunited with her lover, who may or may not have died years ago back in a war at some point. I'm assuming World War II. And once this happens, this kind of frees the curse that was bestowed upon his sister Lisa, and we find out what happened to her, and everything seems to be all right. So, and the story kind of wraps up there. And then, of course, the Midnight Society sends off the segment. And that's essentially what you're going to expect out of the Tale of C7. So, off the bat, I guess we should start with some positives. I really dig the concept of this story. Like I said earlier, this is kind of like if you took Whispering Walls and you blended it with Water Demons. It has this creepy ambiance for the first half of the story. Honestly, from the beginning of it, all the way to the point where Jason first has that face-to-face interaction with the ghost, that was super solid Are You Afraid of the Dark? I mean, that was almost top tier. It was creepy, it was tense, there's some legit suspense going on with the Sam Raimi Evil Dead shots that were done kind of fantastically here, even though the music is kind of odd that they include in it. It's kind of whimsical, but it works for a kid's show. There's something unnerving about it. And the siren wailing is creepy. But, you know, aside from that, and I want to save some of that for the negatives, the acting performances were really well done from pretty much all the cast here. There was no annoying performances. All of them seemed like they brought something or actually cared the day or the weeks they were scheduled to film this. I don't know how long they took to film the episodes, but it seems a bit above average for the acting. And I will say this about it. the atmosphere to this one is, there's something so cozy yet unnerving about being on a desolate lake house. It's a great setting for a horror story, or like a thriller, I should say. And this one kind of spoke to me a little bit. It kind of reminded me of the Lady in the Water story about the woman that was killed by her lover because she got pregnant, out of wedlock, and then now she's said to haunt the lake house she was murdered nearby. It has that kind of vibe to it. And there's this mild legend that's kind of vague and ambiguous about the woman who died at the property. I guess she was waiting for her lover, but he never came back home, and the jukebox broke or something like that. There's some consternation about it, but there's like an urban legend factor going about it too that you kind of pick up on in the story. And I thought that was kind of cool. Aside from those things, let's get into some negatives here. So off the bat, the vagueness is kind of annoying. With all that being said, what I just mentioned about the woman's, how she died and all that, it's kind of wish-washy. The design of the ghost here isn't frightening. It's just an attractive young woman just haunting this kid. I mean, it's mildly scary, intense because of the way David Winning was able to shoot those Sam Raimi shots to make it eerie, but you don't really feel scared by this thing. I kind of wish they put some practical effects on her, or made her look like she drowned or something, or she's kind of decayed. Anything to make her somewhat scary. It doesn't really do it for me. I already mentioned this, but after that second half starts, once Jason first meets the ghost and then it kicks on to the remainder of the story, it gets boring. I mean, there's a whole stretch of maybe 8 minutes of nothing happening. And then the ending just abruptly comes about. The climax, to even call it a climax, the story stumbles into this point where the sister disappears, and almost immediately he's taken to this other dimension where he sees these ghosts, and it turns into the Whispering Walls side of things, where you've seen this story before of reuniting long dead lovers together in the afterlife. Been there, done that. It's an emotional ghost story. It's not really enthralling. It's not really exciting. And yeah, it just kind of ends on a whimper for me. And that's my biggest detriment, is that second half to this one. It just doesn't send it home. It doesn't match the quality of the first half of the episode that was legitimately creepy. The other half is not creepy whatsoever, in my opinion. And one last thing to say about it here is that it kind of lacks an identity, overall in the show. I mentioned before, this is one that I have to keep reminding myself by rewatching it what happens. It's kind of forgettable, honestly. Minus the setting, minus the acting that I might look back on fondly, maybe that Evil Dead homage stuff. Everything else, I've seen it before, done better in dark. As a matter of fact, if you want a creepy by the water lake house story, go watch Water Demons. There's actual ghost monsters in there that look creepy and disturbing. The concept is even better. This one, it has a similar concept, but it's going for a more thematic, endearing tale, I should say, where it's trying to fit into the cost of the mom's wish of having something for her future, for her kids. The cost is that they have to settle something that happened into the past, right? They have to fix a wrong that was made or something that needs to be done so whoever's there can move on so they can have the future. And that correlates, being stuck in the past, being looking to the future. I get the symmetry there, but it's just not interesting. And it's just, it's fine, right? Or pushing a light good. And that's how I feel about this episode overall. I don't really have much else to say about C7. It's just a shoulder shrug for me. Even Whispering Walls, for example. The build-up in the first half is not as good as the build-up in the first half of this story. But that second half of Whispering Walls kind of makes that episode what it is. And makes it, come together a little bit. Due to the randomness that was that first half. This one, there could have been something creepier done. I kind of wish they went with the whole sirens or mermaid concept where they could have had like a mermaid villain finally done scary in kids horror. This could have been the calling card for this tale here. C7 could have been the jukebox that a sailor owned to kind of combat this siren. And now that the jukebox is back, the siren, I guess, wants it to stop from happening. That could have been a fine setup here and would have been a legitimate horror story. But no, it's just emotional ghost stuff, which Dark is known for, but it's not really my speed here. And I can only take small doses of it or ones that are fantastically done. And while, like I keep repeating myself on this, but while the first half is great, I didn't want to see that come out of this one. So it is what it is. All in all, if I had to rate this thing from a 0 to 5 star basis, I thought about this one and I'd probably deduct 1.3 points off the top for all those negatives. They're kind of like medium annoyances that kind of pile on, and there's some missed opportunities that I feel like they should have capitalized on. But nonetheless, I gave this like a 3.7 out of 5 stars. It's my new Are You Afraid of the Dark measuring stick. It's a great episode to compare to other ones that you watch and see if you like it more than this one or like it less than this one. It's kind of just in the middle. In the middle of the pack, as people would say. Nothing too offensive, nothing too great either. And it just ends up here by default, really, but I recommend this one. You know, I mentioned before, if you are, you know, free on time and maybe you like the emotional ghost stories in Dark, this one might do it for you more. Maybe if you like the Water Demon segment or the Whispering Wall segment, you might get something out of this. I've seen some people say that they like C7 more than Whispering Walls at least, so that might do it for you if you didn't like Whispering Walls all that much. And I haven't even reviewed that episode yet, so I might as well get to that in the near future. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the tale of C7. Let me know down in the comments section if you've seen this episode before. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.